my fiancée, and her parents laughed about my late mother, right in the middle of our wedding rehearsal dinner. A few hours later, I made a decision they'll never forget. What do you think a man does when his pride and the memory of his mother get stomped on in front of a crowd? Stick around for this intense story. Sarah Kim, the woman Leo Knox once thought he'd spend the rest of his life with. She was so stunning, the whole room seemed to take a step back to make space for the elegance of that pure white Vera Wang dress and her carefully practiced smile. There Leo stood, a 32-year-old heart surgeon, independent since he was 18, once living in a fourth-floor walk-up apartment with no elevator, just him and his mom. His mother, Mildred Knox, worked as a hospital janitor. A woman with rough, calloused hands, who never bought makeup and always carried a folded handkerchief in her coat pocket. They used to live in a Brooklyn neighborhood so forgotten, most people couldn't even name it. Every winter morning, she'd boil water in an electric kettle so he could wash his face. Every night, she gave up her blanket so her son could sleep warmer than she did. Her whole life was made up of sacrifices like that. Small, quiet, constant. Mildred passed away when Leo was 23, just a second-year med student. No insurance, no early diagnosis, no chance to say goodbye. After the funeral, Leo found an old notebook. His mother's journal, not written regularly, just scattered entries, but every word cut deeper than any medical lecture he'd ever sat through. 3 years later, at a medical fundraiser, Leo met Sarah. She was the event organizer from a completely different world. The daughter of Richard and Elaine Kim, owners of a luxury lingerie brand. She had a confident voice, a slender frame, and eyes that always sparkled with some kind of plan. Sarah made a strong impression, not because of money, but because she didn't flaunt it. She once said, "We don't choose where we're born. What matters is where we end up." That line made Leo lower the armor he'd been wearing since his mother died. After a year of dating, he moved in with her. The apartment was in the Upper East Side, where neighbors drove Bentleys and dogs had scheduled grooming appointments. Everything felt foreign to Leo, but he tried to learn. Learned how to hold a salad knife, learned how to pronounce French menu items, learned how to smile when her parents dropped comments like, "Poor people can succeed, as long as they know their place." Every time that happened, Sarah would just give a small smile and whisper, "They're old, don't take it to heart, I love you, and that's what matters." And Leo believed her, believed she wasn't like them, believed love was enough. Then she proposed. Not him, her. In the middle of a picnic at Yosemite National Park, Sarah got down on one knee, holding a ring Leo never thought he deserved. He nodded. No hesitation. In that moment, he thought of his mother. If she were still alive, she'd be proud. The wedding planning kicked off like a military operation. From the backdrop to the menu to the soundtrack, everything was paid for by her side. Leo felt uneasy about it, but Sarah brushed it off. "I'm not doing this to show off. I'm doing it so we can start this as a team." What Leo didn't realize then, every team has a captain, and not everyone on that team respected the woman who made him who he was. Their wedding was called the social event of the spring. Sarah Kim wasn't just a bride, she was the poster girl for the elite. Smart, modern, influential. Her family booked the rehearsal dinner at a 5-star hotel in Manhattan, the kind with gold-plated ceilings, heavy silverware, and waitstaff who bowed more than they spoke. Leo Knox arrived 10 minutes early. He wore a charcoal gray suit, light blue tie. Nothing unusual about his face, but that night his eyes were quieter than usual. No one noticed. The vibe in the dining room was equal parts elegant and cold. Greetings were delivered at the exact right pitch, the right volume, the right distance. No one spoke too loudly. No one ate too fast. Everything ran with the precision of a stage rehearsal. Leo, despite being used to medical galas, still felt like an extra in a play with no lines. Sarah showed up in an ivory cocktail dress. She hugged Leo, smiled, whispered something no one else could hear. Then she led him toward the head table, where the Kim family was already seated. Richard Kim, the salt-and-pepper-haired man in a 3-piece suit, raised his wine glass. He was the kind of man who believed his rudeness could be disguised as the blunt honesty of a successful businessman. "We're truly lucky to have Leo with us tonight," he said, voice booming. "A young, talented doctor, and especially from a place no one would ever expect to produce a doctor. A few small laughs followed. Leo stared straight into the glass of ice water in front of him. He didn't flinch. Richard carried on, like he'd just found his favorite material for the evening's entertainment. "This one's a good story," Richard laughed. "I heard someone say, correct me if I'm wrong, his mother used to mop hospital floors, right? Truly inspiring. A real American dream moment. Mom mops, son opens chests. Now that's what I call evolution." A laugh rang out from the next table. Someone raised a glass. A young woman muttered, "That's wild." Elaine Kim, Sarah's mother, tapped her fingers lightly on the table, as if to gather attention. She tilted her head and offered a graceful smile, the kind only people in the event planning business ever master. "Sweetie," she said, turning to a guest, "it's living proof that education isn't just for the wealthy, but also for those who are ambitious and, well, willing to mop enough floors." A wave of laughter followed. Not loud, just enough to make someone feel a few inches smaller. Leo sat up straight, chin slightly lowered, his hand tightening around the napkin on his lap. And then Sarah laughed, not loudly, but it was a nodding laugh, the kind that says I'm in on the joke. No one noticed. No one cared. But that moment, Leo's silence, his eyes drifting toward the window, his hand freezing mid-motion, that was the first crack. Outside, the late afternoon sun filtered through the glass, casting a faint orange streak across the white tablecloth. But inside, the chill lingered, even with the heaters turned up high. The dinner carried on. Appetizers were served. Someone started talking about the big wedding tomorrow. Sarah leaned toward Leo and whispered, "My dad was just joking. Don't take it to heart." He nodded, just nodded, said nothing. No one there knew that Leo had just finished writing a goodbye letter, in his mind. Not with words. Not with anger. Just with a decision. Cold and clear as the glass of melting ice in front of him. Leo didn't say another word after the dinner. As the luxury cars rolled away from the hotel one by one, he chose to walk. Sarah asked if she should call him a car. He shook his head. Said he just needed some air. She didn't push. She had 100 wedding details to finalize. Spring nights in New York were just cold enough to tug at memory. The car horns from the avenue, the smell of charred pizza crust from a street corner, the neon glow of a 24-hour store. None of it cleared his head. Every step just pulled him further back to that old kitchen floor, where he used to sit while his mother patched his jeans with her non-dominant hand. The old apartment didn't have a heater. On the coldest nights, his mother would sit on a plastic chair, back against the wall, lighting candles instead of turning on a lamp. Her hands were stiff from the cold, but they never stopped moving the needle. He once asked why she didn't buy a sewing machine. She answered, "If my hands still work, there's no excuse to be lazy." That line now echoed in his mind like a wake-up bell. His steps slowed. The sound of his leather shoes hit the stone sidewalk with a dry, hollow thud. Wind brushed across his face, sharp and stinging. But the cold wasn't from the wind. He'd stayed silent too long. Every time Sarah's family made a jab, he'd tell himself, "They're older. Don't act childish." Every time Sarah gave that awkward smile in response, he'd convince himself, "She's caught in the middle. She's just keeping the peace." But today was different. She didn't give an awkward smile. She gave a real one. And nodded. The hotel was just a few blocks from the dinner. He walked into his room, took off his coat, and sat down in the chair. From his bag, he pulled out a worn notebook, his mother's journal. The pages were yellowed, corners folded. The black ink was wobbly, careful but unpolished. He flipped to the middle. One page had a faint pencil mark underlining a passage. Never let anyone turn gratitude into shame. Gratitude is beautiful. Shame is a trap. A grateful person walks with their head high. A shameful one keeps it down. You were born to move forward, not to bow forever. Leo closed his eyes. His breath sank, deep and heavy. He had once felt grateful to Sarah. She loved him when he had nothing. She pulled him into a world he wasn't born into. She protected him, or so he'd thought. But now, he wasn't so sure. He picked up his phone, opened a blank message, typed one word at a time. "I don't know if tonight made you proud, but for me, it was the night where every bit of trust quietly cracked. You listened to them, you laughed. You didn't stop them. You didn't have to say anything. Your silence said it all." His finger hovered over send. He read it once, then again a third time, and then he hit delete. The message vanished, just like the sense of trust that was fading inside him. Leo set the phone down. He didn't need an argument. He didn't need anger. He needed clarity. And by tomorrow morning, everything would be clear. Either he was wrong, or he'd been seeing the wrong person for the past 3 years. He turned on the bedside lamp, switched off the ceiling light, set the journal next to his pillow. That night, he didn't sleep deeply, but he didn't toss and turn either. He just lay there, eyes open, waiting for morning, not counting down to a wedding, but to a final decision. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the half-drawn curtains, soft and thin, as if it, too, was treading lightly. Leo opened his eyes. He didn't check his email, didn't listen to a podcast, didn't play music. He just lay there for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling. Everything was quiet, unnervingly so. His phone buzzed, a message from Sarah. No apology, no question. Just, "I think today is the happiest day of our lives." He read it again and again. The words were simple, neat, but completely disconnected from the storm pounding inside his chest. No mention of last night, no check-in to see how he was, no reference to anything that had actually happened. It read like an automated message, lifeless and rigid. Leo sat up. Every movement was slow and deliberate. He didn't feel nervous. He didn't feel anxious. What he felt most clearly was a kind of disconnect between who he truly was and who today was trying to make him be. He got dressed. White shirt, black slacks. The suit was already hanging in the closet. Everything had been prepared in advance. Even the tie had been pre-knotted by Sarah, hanging neatly on a hook like a period at the end of his personal freedom. On the way to the barber shop, he didn't think much, just walked, step by step, like grooming was a task he simply had to check off. The shop sat on the ground floor of an old red brick building. Same place he used to go when he still lived nearby. The barber's name was Dennis, old, silver-haired, voice rough, but his eyes still sharp like someone half his age. He didn't talk much while cutting, but today, just before Leo stood up, Dennis reached into a drawer and pulled out a small, dark wooden box. I think you should have it," he said. Leo opened the lid. Inside was an old lapel pin, dull silver, slightly scratched, shaped like a tiny daisy. He recognized it instantly. It was the one his mother used to pin to her coat on special occasions. Not expensive, not fashionable, but to her it was a reminder to lead with kindness. "Your mom dropped it here the last time she came in for a cut." Leo didn't say a word, just gave a small nod. His eyes weren't wet, but they were deeper than usual. Back at the hotel, he stood in front of the mirror. The suit fit perfectly. The tie sat just right. But what made him pause wasn't the outfit. It was the reflection staring back at him. Brown eyes, high bridge of the nose, a firm jawline, all features he'd inherited from his mother. And he remembered every word. Once, after being yelled at by a hospital manager for cleaning the hallway too slowly, she came home and said, "Don't let anyone define us by the shoes they wear." Back then it felt like just a comforting line, but now it was a compass. He picked up the lapel pin, fastened it to his jacket. Neat, subtle, but unmistakable. Leo didn't need any more reminders, not from friends, not from Sarah, and definitely not from her family. He knew the one thing worth carrying into that ceremony wasn't a wedding ring. It was the memory of the woman who taught him to bow his head out of kindness, but stand tall out of honor. The guests were already seated by 10:30 a.m. The videographer had set up 3 camera angles. The servers stood still as statues. The scent of orchids from the centerpieces filled the room with a sweetness that bordered on suffocating. Elaine Kim adjusted her husband's sleeve, glanced at her watch, and kept smiling. She had chosen a silver-gray gown, understated enough not to outshine her daughter's dress, but just bold enough to remind everyone who paid for today. Sarah appeared right at 11. A mermaid-style wedding gown, intricately beaded, her hair pinned up in a flawless bun. One hand held the bouquet, the other rested on her father's arm. She walked between the rows of seats like she was on a runway. Lights, cameras, admiring whispers. Only one thing broke the rhythm. Guests started glancing at each other. The groom still hadn't arrived. 1 minute, then 2. Elaine whispered something into her husband's ear. Richard shrugged, his face unchanged. Sarah tried to smile, but her grip on the bouquet tightened. Exactly 5 minutes later, Leo walked in, not rushed, not flustered. His suit was crisp, his hair neatly combed. On his chest, the daisy-shaped pin caught the midday light with a strange, quiet shimmer. His left hand wasn't holding a ring box. His right hand held a small, worn notebook with a peeling leather spine. No one asked. No one dared. Everyone just watched. He walked slowly, one step at a time. No one could guess what he was thinking, but there was no trace of nerves on his face. Only a stillness, cold and composed. Leo stood beside Sarah. She tilted her head and whispered, "I thought you weren't coming." He didn't answer. His eyes were on the officiant, who smiled back with a hint of hesitation. The ceremony began. The officiant spoke a few opening words about love, commitment, forgiveness, and the journey of two young people stepping into a new life together. The words were familiar, the kind everyone's heard before. But today, something felt off. When it came time for the vows, Sarah was invited to go first. She pulled a small piece of paper from her bouquet, gave the officiant a soft smile, and began. "I promise to love you, even when you sometimes forget where you are. I promise to never let our past define our future. And I promise to love you, even when the traces of your old poverty still show in your eyes whenever we fight." A few quiet chuckles rippled through the room. No one was sure whether they should clap. Sarah kept smiling, as if she'd just said something profound. But Leo didn't smile. He tilted his head slightly, almost politely, and interrupted. "That's enough." The entire hall froze. Sarah stiffened, still holding the slip of paper. The officiant blinked, about to speak, but Leo raised one hand, not to object, but to ask for the floor. He didn't look at Sarah. He opened the small notebook, flipping through its pages with deliberate care. Each sheet seemed thinner under his fingers. And then he stopped, hand holding the page, eyes locked on the words, not blinking. The guests began to feel the shift. The air no longer held the quiet anticipation of a wedding. It carried something else now, something closer to the tension before a storm, one forming in a place no one could see coming. Leo took a breath, then spoke, low, steady, and without a trace of a tremble, not to vow, but to begin something entirely different. For a moment he said nothing. Just the sound of a single page turning, so soft it barely registered in the thick silence that had taken over the room. No one understood what was happening. No one expected the groom to say anything other than vows. But he didn't speak to profess love. He spoke to remember. Leo's eyes settled on a familiar line, written in the shaky hand of a woman who never finished 8th grade, yet wrote each word like it was the only thing keeping her son tethered to his dignity. He stood tall, left hand holding the journal, right hand resting calmly at his side, his index finger gently touching the daisy pin on his chest. His voice rang out, not loud, not dramatic, but clear and firm. "My son, if one day they don't respect your mother, walk away. Don't let love make you forget your self-worth." No one breathed, no one moved. The words didn't feel like speech. They felt like a blade. Thin, sharp. Sarah stood frozen, still in the same posture she'd held after finishing her vows. The paper in her hand trembled slightly. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. Leo didn't look at her right away. He stared straight ahead, as if speaking to a figure no one else could see at the end of the aisle. Then he closed the notebook gently, like sealing away something sacred. He wasn't rushed. Every movement felt premeditated. No one interrupted. The officiant took a small step forward, lips parting. But then he stopped. There was something in Leo's gaze that made it clear. Now was not the time to speak, and maybe there never would be. Leo finally turned to face Sarah. For the first time since she entered the room, his look carried no anger, no blame, just something sharper than both, clarity. "I love you," he said. His voice was softer now, but not weak. "But I love my mother more than I fear being silent." That sentence didn't ask for a reply. It left no space for excuses. It was a blade that landed exactly between love and dignity. The place where, if love can pass through, it becomes eternal. But if it can't, it ends right there. No one in the room moved. No camera clicked. Somewhere in the back, someone swallowed hard. Leo raised his hand and unclipped the daisy pin. It came off easily, almost like it had been waiting for this moment. He stepped forward to the altar and placed it down, right between the two elaborate wedding flower arrangements. No one in the crowd knew what the pin meant, but something about the way he set it down, with both hands, head bowed slightly, made it feel more important than any wedding ring. And then he turned and walked away. He didn't rush. He wasn't shaken. Each step he took seemed to slice through the air, leaving behind a silence deeper than any music that had played that day. No one tried to stop him. No one called out. No hand reached to hold him back. The doors at the back of the hall opened, white light poured in, and Leo disappeared into it, as if, in the end, he had chosen light over the false grandeur left behind. The moment the doors shut behind him, the silence in the room finally cracked, not with tears, but with whispers that spilled out uncontrollably. Like everyone had just been given permission to breathe after 5 suffocating minutes. Sarah still stood frozen, the paper with her vows clenched in her hand like it had been fused there. From the front row, Elaine rushed up the steps, leaned in close to her daughter's ear, and whispered, "Smile. Don't let the cameras catch your face like that." Sarah didn't answer. Her lips stayed closed, pale. Richard wasn't as subtle as his wife. He turned to the nearest guest and muttered, low but loud enough, "The boy's unstable, lost his mother, never got his head right, should have postponed the wedding." That comment wasn't just heard by the person next to him. Another guest, still holding their phone, had recorded everything. From the moment Leo began reading his mother's journal to the moment he walked out. No Zoom, no edits. Every detail was there. Leo's calm voice, Sarah's expression, even the way the daisy pin was placed down like a silent farewell that needed no soundtrack. Less than 2 hours later, the clip was online. No hashtags, no commentary, just a single, quiet caption. Groom reads his mother's journal, then leaves the wedding, says nothing else. 4 hours later, the video had 10,000 shares. By midnight, it passed 150,000. By the next afternoon, it was everywhere, mirrored across every platform. The media jumped in. Some headlines read like movie trailers. "He didn't cancel the wedding, he chose the woman who's gone." Or, "Heart surgeon walks out of wedding over a single line in his mother's journal." Meanwhile, the comment sections became battlegrounds of public opinion. One side argued Leo had overreacted, called it dramatic, irresponsible, said he should have handled it privately instead of turning the wedding into a moral theater. But the majority didn't see it that way. He didn't choose a wedding. He chose his conscience. "If someone insulted my mother and I still went through with the marriage, I wouldn't be human." That line, "I love my mother more than I fear being silent," deserves to be carved into stone. People who had lived through class-based shame began sharing their own stories. One woman wrote, "I once sat through my own wedding hearing my mother-in-law mock my mom's broken English. I laughed it off, but I cried like a child." Even within the medical community, the ripple reached far. A well-known doctor reposted the clip with the caption, "A man can stitch a heart, but it's integrity that keeps it beating." Leo Knox, I know your name now. Sarah and her family made no official statement. Some sources claimed they were considering legal action for invasion of privacy. But the person who filmed the clip gave only one simple response. "I shared it because it felt real. People need to see what's real, not the dress, not the flowers, the truth." And that was why the story didn't fade. No one expected a wedding with a gold-plated backdrop to become a symbol of something you can't decorate: dignity. After the media storm, Leo vanished from every platform. No statements, no interviews, no social media posts to explain or defend. Those who'd worked with him stayed quiet too. No one knew where he went, what he was doing, or how he felt after walking away from a ceremony that left behind more than silence. It left a clean, sharp cut in the middle of a crowd. For 3 months, there was nothing but silence. No news, no sightings. But instead of disappearing forever, Leo chose to return, in a way no one expected, with a book. Title: I Chose My Mother. The cover was simple, white background, a single embossed silver daisy, identical to the lapel pin he removed at the altar. No tagline, no photo, no foreword from any celebrity. Just one name, Leo Knox. The book was introduced as an honest memoir of a son raised in mop-lined hallways who became a heart surgeon and chose to keep his own heart intact. It wasn't sensational. It didn't accuse, it didn't blame. Instead, it offered a detailed account of growing up poor with a single mother, a woman who never called herself a victim. Mildred Knox, through her son's eyes, wasn't someone fluent in emotion, but she knew how to turn a cheap dinner into a lesson in kindness, and a small paycheck into a masterclass in dignity. Leo wrote about how his mother never apologized for being poor. She never tried to hide it. She wasn't ashamed. More importantly, she never let her son believe it made them lesser than anyone else. One passage became the most widely shared online. My mother didn't teach me how to get rich. She taught me how not to be poor in character. She never begged for respect. She just lived in a way that made disrespect look ridiculous. The book sold 10,000 copies in its first week, not because of any marketing campaign, but because of the very people who had watched that wedding clip. They bought it. They gifted it. They quoted it online like a kind of personal manifesto. By the third week, a nonprofit supporting orphans invited Leo to speak at an education seminar. He asked for no fee, no special treatment, just one request: no flashy backdrop, no introductions by title. He spoke calmly, eyes steady, hands still, no script, no slides, just holding an old photocopy of his mother's journal, each page laminated to preserve the ink. At the end of the talk, a girl around 12 approached him. Her eyes were puffy from crying. She whispered, "I don't know who my parents are, but if I ever get to be a mom, I want my kid to write about me the way you wrote about yours." Leo knelt down, unpinned the daisy from his lapel, and clipped it to the child's shirt pocket. He didn't say a word. A volunteer quietly recorded the moment. And once again, the image of the man who had once walked away from a wedding for the sake of his mother was now choosing to walk forward, still on the path she had quietly laid. Not with noise, not with drama, but with something quieter, deeper. The legacy of dignity. Leo's return wasn't loud, but it couldn't be ignored. From the man who walked out of his own wedding in silence, he became a symbol of something the world had started to dismiss as outdated: loyalty to the ones we've lost, and a quiet, unwavering grip on what's right. In the months that followed, Leo continued working at the hospital. He gave the occasional talk, small gatherings, no cameras, and declined every invitation to appear on television. He didn't chase fame. He didn't try to repackage his story. For him, everything that needed to be said was already in the book. The rest was just about living in a way that honored it. 6 months after the day the wedding became history, a message arrived on a cold winter evening. It had just rained. Condensation still clung to the window glass. The room was lit with the soft flickering gold of a desk lamp. The message was from Sarah. Just one line: "I understand now. I'm sorry, but I still miss you." There was no blame, no anger, but also no clear request. Sarah's message hung in that gray space, as if she knew she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, yet still reached out, hoping to touch some fragment of what once was. Leo stared at the screen for a long moment. No blinking, no smile, no sadness. He didn't reply right away, didn't type a single word. Instead, he stood up and walked to his bookshelf. Amid hundreds of medical texts and old novels sat the first printed copy of I Chose My Mother. He opened to page 143, the one he had written without imagining anyone in particular would ever read it. But tonight, someone finally deserved to. He took a photo, sent it, no caption, no explanation, just a photo of the book page with one single line printed in bold at the center. "A woman can wear a wedding dress, but not every woman has the heart to be a wife." Not long after, the message marked as seen. And then nothing. Sarah didn't reply, didn't ask again, didn't try to explain. That message was the last time they ever spoke. And for Leo, that was enough. Some words don't need to be long. Some endings don't need applause. And some lessons, like love, only mean something when paid for with the right kind of silence. The orphanage sat in a quiet suburb. No skyscrapers, no neon ads, no one asking about status or last names. Leo came there 3 evenings a week after long hospital shifts, not because anyone asked him to, not for publicity, just because he knew it mattered. The kids gave him a strange nickname, one that a child had once made up and the rest never let go: the doctor for mothers who are gone. It sounded like a title, but to Leo it was a reminder of where he started, why he stood up, and of the woman whose strength still lived in the man he was becoming. He didn't share much personal history with the kids, but they knew. They saw the silver daisy on his lapel, now dulled with time, and called it the kindness badge. One child once asked, "Aren't you scared people will laugh at that?" Leo smiled gently and said, "If someone laughs because I love my mother, that sadness belongs to them, not me." Every time Leo pinned that daisy back onto his jacket, it wasn't out of grief. It was pride. Because some things, the closer you wear them to your heart, the straighter you can walk through the world. Almost a year had passed since the wedding that never happened. He hadn't fallen in love again. But he hadn't shut down either. He wasn't in a hurry. He understood now. Some relationships have to end so you can learn how to love yourself better. And some decisions need to be cold, so your heart can stay warm long after. I Chose My Mother continued to be reprinted. But Leo didn't do book signings, didn't attend festivals, turned down every offer to turn his story into a film. He kept the silence, not out of distance, but as part of a promise he had already made through action. The things that truly matter don't need a stage. One day, a little girl at the orphanage gave Leo a crayon drawing. It showed him standing beside a woman with curly hair, holding a mop. Both were smiling under the rain. At the bottom, in messy handwriting, it read, "I don't know where your mom is now, but I'm sure you made her really proud." Leo framed it, hung it in the hospital hallway, right where he walked past every day. His life wasn't a movie with a flashy ending, but it was a story built out of choices that meant something. Every quiet retreat, every journal page, every nod without a word, every moment he didn't speak, but acted. Once, a journalist still trying to land an interview managed to ask, "Do you ever regret it? Walking away that day?" Leo gave just one answer, short, quiet, and in the exact way he'd chosen to live since that day. "I won't let anyone wear my mother's shoes just to step on her memory. And that was the best decision of my life." Some loves have to end so that self-respect can survive. And some mothers, even after they're gone, keep raising their children, not with words, but by example. What about you? If it were you, would you have walked away like Leo? Would you choose love or choose dignity? If this story stirred something in you, like, share and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because sometimes what we need isn't a perfect ending. It's the right reason to stop. Thank you for listening to the whole story.